Hey, it's Kevin Johnson with Treble.com, and I'm sitting here with Chris Minh Doky, a great bass player, has a new album out called New Beginnings, has a new course on Discover Double Bass, has a new book out. Is that right? You've got all sorts of things going on this year.
Yeah, I mean, I can't sit still.
Yeah, it's a pretty big year. Um, but I saw one thing on your credits, and this is a little bit of an aside, but I don't think too many bass players have been knighted before. And
Yeah,
and so I saw that on your CV, and I just thought I want to know the story behind that. What was that like?
well, it was a trip. I remember this is like a while ago. It's like what, 15 years ago. But it was funny. I was like touring in Europe, and there was this number that kept calling me, and I didn't know the number, so I didn't pick up. And then and he kept calling like every day for like 10 days. And then I don't know what happened. I think it was before a sound check in France somewhere. So I picked up and said hello. And they said like, yes, hello, this is from the cultural ministry. Would you accept a knighthood from the royal family? And we're like, what? Is this April's Fool? It was April 1st. So I thought it was April's Fool. So I was like, really? Are you serious? Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I guess so. And I still didn't kind of believe it, but it turned out to be true. So it was like a huge surprise. I didn't see that one coming, and obviously a huge honor, basically,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was basically, what does it say on the thing? It's like for my contributions to the arts and spreading Danish culture in the world and whatever.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
whatever it
mean,
is, hey, it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Seems like you're doing the right stuff. Yeah, well, does that mean much to you taking Danish culture around? I know that a few of your projects have included the word nomad, and
Right.
your band is Nomad. So is that kind of a thing for you, taking Danish music around and Danish culture around, or?
I mean, I don't really think about it. I mean, I'm born into a multicultural family. My mom was Danish, and my father was from Vietnam, and I grew up in Denmark and France, and I moved to the States when I was 17, 18 years old. So, I know it sounds corny and everything, but I just feel like a human being, and I happen, happen to have the luck to be raised all these places. So I feel a part of all the places. With that said, of course, Denmark has, just like the U.S. has shaped me a lot. Denmark has shaped me a lot, and France has too, and Vietnam for that matter. But in terms of the Danish thing, my mom used to be a singer, and she would sing to me ever since I can remember. And so the way she would phrase influenced me a lot. The way I phrase melodies and stuff, and what she would sing to me mostly was Danish folk songs and Danish psalms. So, that's for sure has influenced me a lot. Not to say that the Vietnamese culture and the French culture has influenced me a lot, and definitely, where I've lived the most is in the States, and that totally influenced me too. But in terms of exactly knowing where stuff came from, I was always aware that the way my mom phrased a melody was Danish.
Yeah. Well, that was another question I had for you is, there's a lot of talk about Scandinavian jazz and the Scandinavian sound. Like, how would you describe that? I feel like when I hear it, I'm like, yeah, that's, someone from Northern Europe, kind of that sound. How would you kind of describe that?
Well, I mean, I think there's like different aspects of it. I mean, like bass playing wise, I would think that like we grew up, like one of the most famous Danish bass players Nordic bass players, Niels Henning Pedersen. And he was amazing. And he kind of showed how the acoustic bass could be a lead instrument. Not to say that he was the first, because, one of the big influences of Niels Henning that I happen to know really well was Scott LaFera. So when you listen to Scott LaFera, you can hear a lot of Scott LaFera in Niels Henning's play, but his whole technique and his definition and his intonation for one was very special. So if you grew up in Scandinavia, I started playing bass really late. I started at 15, but if you grow up at some point in Scandinavia, especially in the 70s and early 80s, you could not turn on the radio or TV and hear Nils Henning somehow play a melody on the bass. So, instinctively, without knowing who played the bass, when you heard the bass, it was just in tune and very articulate. So when I finally, what got me into the upright bass was Ron Carter and Paul Chambers and Ray Brown and all those guys, and those are still my heroes today. But when I picked up the upright bass, I was like, man, something's wrong. It's not in tune. What's going on? And that was just because growing up hearing that instrument, it was just like, it was intonated correctly. So in terms of bass, that's what it is. Like Nordic jazz, I mean, and being half Danish, I can say that without blowback, I think, but sometimes it could also be a punchline, because jazz is jazz, and jazz is American folk music. But we have our accents of all sorts of stuff in the Nordic countries. And to me, when I think about Nordic jazz, it's more like a harmonic thing. It's a harmonic thing where there's not that many influences from the American songbook. It's more like a triady kind of thing, and it's more transparent and less dense harmonically, if you ask me. And very, and it's a used word, but it's also very like melodic and singable because it's just part of how things are. But so that's me harmonically and melodic. How's that? And then also it's very folky too, and that's also thanks to say like Jan Garbarek in Norway and Bobo Steenson and Jon Christensen on drum. All those guys, they completely the thing. I mean, Keith Jarrett went to Scandinavia and picked up a band, and he did my song, and it was basically Bobo Steenson's band. He just took the piano chair,
Yeah.
So that's the way I personally view the more Nordic jazz thing. It's not so much of a swingy thing, and in terms of drums too, I think, and that's both jazz and also over in the fusiony stuff and the funk stuff. Like the more north you come in Europe, it's less about the drums and more about the cymbals. And the more south you come in Europe, and the more west in the U.S., there's a lot of drums involved. And playing drums is not just cymbals. And again, this is my opinion, but so it's lighter in all sense of the musical aspects, and less so a body thing. So it's more ethereal than it is like grounded. And also when you hear bass players play from Northern Europe, it becomes more of up here than down here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I mean that's kind of a Niels Singer thing, right? He's like a throatier kind of more top end attack kind of sound. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Also the way he developed that pickup for Wilson pickups, which the one he played was basically a piezo pickup. And it was very great in the 80s for that sound. But personally, I as I said, I'm as much influenced, if not even more, from the American tradition, from not only for moving there so early, but also the people that brought me up in jazz. So the more earthy, the more body thing, spoke more to me about the low end too.
Who was like your first, besides NHOP, who was your first like jazz bass guy?
Like acoustic guy?
Yeah, the first
Ron
guy
Carter.
that you just really got into. Yeah, Ron Carter.
Oh, totally. I mean, I when I started playing bass, I started playing electric bass, and I was into Verdi and White and Sting and Bootsy Collins, obviously, and James Jamerson. I was into all of that, and I knew jazz. There was a lot of music in my home, mostly classical from my dad and my mom and stuff. But my brother started to like listen to jazz, so jazz became kind of a thing at the house. and I liked it, but it was kind of his domain, so I was not really into it. And then a friend in school gave me an album with Miles Davis, and he would feed me all these great albums that we play in a band we had, and he gave me My Funny Valentine. And when I heard Ron Carter in that album, I was like, I'm done. I mean, whoa, the sound, the feel, and you know, don't get me wrong, but when he plays like that low G on All Blues, it's like somebody touched the face of God, you know.
Yeah.
And the funkiness, like, oh, it was funky. And so I heard that album, I was done. I was the only person I listened to from that moment on for like 2 years was Ron Carter. And then, then I got into obviously Paul Chambers and then Ray Brown. Whew. And then Eddie Gomez, obviously, too. And then only then did I start to, I was aware of the influences from Nils Henning, but I never really checked it out because I was so into the other tradition. And that's when I started checking out that tradition, not only with Nils Henning, but also with Lars Danielsson from Sweden and Anders Jurmin and R.L. Anderson and then Charlie Hayden back in the States and stuff, But Ron Carter, and still to this day, I mean, when I hear when I started analyzing, transcribing him, it's like, you don't know what chord it is until Ron picks up a root,
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. And that, that approach when then I got, back into the funky stuff, and I got, before I started playing, I got into also Marcus Miller and all that stuff. That whole approach, like when I play more rocky stuff or funk or the in-between stuff, it's still that jazz direction and jazz mentality, even when it's straight out rock or straight up funk, And that's what I love about Marcus Miller, for example. It's like, when he plays, I get the upright feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's that kind of intangible, like earthy quality that still comes with it. Yeah.
I think it's like the earthiness, the also the sound wise, it sounds extremely organic. And I love playing electric. I do it a lot, when I play with Mike Stern and when I used to play with Sanborn, I used to play a lot of electric. I still do, and love it. But I know that the sound and feel I have on the electric is kind of uprighty and vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was never really like a preamp electric, and also like my attack on the electric is kind of hard, and that comes from the upright, I guess, So.
Yeah, I had a gig one time where I was playing electric. I mostly play upright. I was playing electric. A guy came up afterwards and said, "Oh, you're an upright player, aren't you?" I said, "Oh, God." Caught me,
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So I want to talk about your new album, which I've been digging on. Is really cool. And that came out like February, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's called New Beginnings. And is it your first album in 7 years? First solo album in 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, once I'm on a roll, I keep doing it, but it took me a minute. I've been really busy playing concerts and tours and stuff, and I was searching for what I wanted to say on an album. I had Nomads. This is like my third edition of the Nomads. The first Nomads I did was like in the 90s. No, that was in the zeros. That was with Hiram Bullock and a Danish keyboard, Paul Ryman and Keith Carlock. And then Hiram passed, and then we did a new Nomads with Weckl and George Whitty and Dean Brown. And then we played with that band forever. And then I wanted to do something new. And it was like, right before COVID and stuff. And then I did the new Nordic Jazz, acoustic, simple trio, completely acoustic. And what I did was basically I wanted to describe in sound what it was like to be being born in the north in Denmark, and what I did was I gave myself all these limitations. I could not use harmonies from the American Songbook, and I could only use stuff that was homegrown. So that became that, and then I played with that a whole lot, and I could feel, you know, I needed something new. If I do one thing too long, I want to do something else, and I knew I wanted to do something like more electric and more big in sound and more funky, if you wish, more modern and stuff. But I was experimented so much what kind of sound I wanted to do, because when you're not doing this stuff in between, personally, I don't like that sound like fusion jazz, because maybe it's because of the age, but the fusion to me is kind of a style. And to me, fusion is more like you're trying to mix stuff. And I knew I wanted something more modern. So what I wanted to was to bring stuff in from the contemporary pop world, like Billie Eilish and all these guys, like some stuff from Beyonce and all these producers doing that sound, but then see if I can make it work with improvisation and being instrumental and all that stuff. And I fucked around with it for quite a while, and then all of a sudden there it was. I knew what I wanted to say or where I wanted to go, and from that moment on, it went quick. I mean, that whole album, when I started it till I had the master for 6 months, but it took me like a good part of 5 years to get there. And once I had it, and I knew what direction and what I wanted to say, then it kind of like just wrote itself. So that's why it took so long, but it's not going to be that long again. I'm already working on the upcoming one.
Okay, all right. We'll give you another 6 months. How about that?
All right. Cool.
No, that's cool, man. I just really enjoyed it. Even just like from the very beginning, the Sniper. I love that. That song's so cool. And just start with the big slides and everything, just like setting the mood, you know.
Oh man. That's Ron Carter.
Yeah. I could hear that. Yeah, I could hear that.
I stole that from Mr. Carter.
I was listening while I was walking my dog, and your bass solo came on, and I was like bopping to it, and then you kick on like the distortion, and I was like, oh God, and you like got me just hit bass face as I'm walking down the street. People probably thought I was crazy, but yeah. So when you're doing that, did you put that in post or did you do that live? Did you record this live?
I did that live.
It's all live. What kind of were you recording with your electric upright or your acoustic upright?
On that album, everything is on my electric upright except for the tune called New Beginnings, which is my acoustic, actually my small acoustic. But yeah, no, I do that live, and I've always futzed around with effects on the bass. I did, funny enough, an album years ago called The Nomad Diaries, where this whole nomad thing came up. It's when I was playing in Michael Brecker's quartet, and like we hung tough, and we talked a lot about music. And although we were playing as this quartet, and it was like, you know, straight ahead jazz, and I loved the shit out of it. It was so great playing with this band, and Mike Brecker and I, we both have a love for all the like technical stuff, you know, tech stuff, and we were talking about all this electronic jazz stuff. So it went back and forth. So he kind of got me into experiment with all the electronic stuff with jazz, and unfortunately he passed away before we finished the album. But he ended up, you know, thank God he played on the album, because that album was a lot because of him. And sparring with him about what to do and everything. But that got me on the track to investigate and research how we could do this effect thing on the bass. And it's just grown ever since. And with the distortion in particular, that also was egged on from all the years I've been playing with Mike Stern. You know, after his solo, he does it, and it creates like a big crater of it. He's killing great solos. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could. And then one day, without him knowing, I brought a distortion pedal. I was like, all right, So no, I love to fuck around with all that stuff, and it is, and I made a conscious effort that when I started the Nomads again this third time around, that's part of the new beginnings thing is like I'm not just gonna screw around with it. I'm gonna commit. I'm gonna do it, and then work it into my arsenal, work it into how I write and how I solo stuff. So yeah, so the whole New Beginnings title is about a large part of it is about committing to ideas, not searching forever because like here it is, here let's go, let's do it. And you make mistakes, but what the hell? Then you learn and then you keep going. And also New Beginnings, just like so much stuff in the world is changing. So like let's start fresh.
Sounds like a good idea to me, but yeah, man, that's awesome. Can we get geeky and talk about like what kind of pedals and you're playing your Yamaha silent bass.
Exactly.
Are you using? They just put out like the 300 or something like that last year or so.
I think
is
the
that
latest
what you're
model.
using?
Yeah, I'm using the SLB 300 Pro, and actually I worked with Yamaha developing this bass back in like '99, and the SLB 100 came out and everything. And I really enjoyed that bass. When it started out, it was like because right after 9/11. And that was when I was touring a lot with Mike Brecker. I had my acoustic in a flight case. And before 9/11, it was kind of easy to tour with an acoustic bass. But after 9/11, so I spoke to Yamaha. And anyway, long story short, this came out. And it was supposed to just be like for rehearsals and around town and stuff. And then as the model progressed, it just became better and better. And all of a sudden, it became an instrument on its own. And now today it's like I play this instrument maybe 55, 60% of the time, but F the upright, and then the rest is the acoustic. Also because it's got some really cool electronics in it. Now, like the feel, I don't know if you tried it, but the feel it feels like the real thing.
When I got to try it at NAMM, it's one of the few like electric uprights that I like the feel of. It feels like the neck especially feels like a real bass. It feels like you can dig in like a real bass.
Exactly. You don't have to like get used to yet another instrument.
Right.
And then now that there's this electronic part of it is where there's a modeling system inside. And we recorded an acoustic bass with 3 different microphones and subtracted what the sound is and only what the acoustic box of the bass gives and the microphone gives, and that you can blend into the sound coming from the bass. So essentially what's coming out of the bass is like the real thing. And I just found out, especially when I do all of these like more like loud and rocky things, makes a lot more sense. It doesn't feed, and you still get that funky, earthy sound, and you can rock out on it. And the more, as much as I can, and again, I love playing electric, I really do. But I think I have a thing on the upright, and I try to, even on tunes that traditionally would be electric, I take the upright electric. I mean, the band I have with Robin Ford this summer. We do a lot of Robin's tunes, which traditionally is electric, but I do in the upright electric, and it's funky. And this bass can do that because it doesn't have the live microphones. You still get the point without losing the body and the earth of it. So no, I really dig playing the bass, and then also another thing, like traveling with it. It's a lot of as many flights that we're on always. It's a lifesaver.
Yeah, I can imagine that. What I was going to ask about is to go even further. What kind of pedals have you been experimenting with? Do you have like a go-to, or are you a multi-effects kind of guy, like a big floor unit, or?
I mean, when I started out with the effect things, I was like on like the single pedal stuff, and I started messing around with that, but have like the whole thing about the rooting and putting that pedal before the other thing, and yeah, it became a nightmare for it because that could change the sound too. So I pretty quickly got into the multi effects because it's easier move around the routing, which one comes before, then you can change stuff. So, for the past couple of years, I've been using like the Line 6 Helix stuff. And that to me is really cool because besides you have all the pedal stuff, and if you like me, you're not quite aware what it does if you push the compressor before the distortion. I'm like, let's see what it sounds like. When I was playing with Dean Brown, he knew all this stuff. Oh man, you gotta get this one before because all of this and this. I'm like, huh? So I like the Helix. I could just like whoop, bing, boom, bang, and then you figure it out quick.
Yeah.
And it's also, my reality is I travel so much, so the smaller I can get my lighter and get my gear, the better. And I wouldn't be able to figure out when I see these pedal boards with like 16 pedals on there, I get anxiety.
Yeah, that's 16 things that can mess up, Yeah, that's understandable. Getting back to the album, one of the other things that I thought was really cool when I was reading the liner notes is that your son is on it, right? And helped co-write some songs. Is that the first time you guys have worked together, like on record?
Yeah.
Tell me about how that worked out. My son is 2, he's 7, and he's just too like spazzed out to sit down and really work stuff out, But he's got a great voice, so I'm really looking forward to doing this. So how do I cultivate
I hope
that?
you get to experience it. It's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, my son Milo, he's 20, and he's incredibly talented, and he doesn't have it from me. I mean, the level he's talented is unbelievable. He was always into music. He started playing piano, taught by my dad, and then he joined a classical orchestra on alto sax, and then he got really into producing and all that stuff and checking out music and I was involved, yes, but not overtly. It was more like, hey, check this out, and he would come with albums and check this out, and we started like having this really great relationship about hipping each other to music, and I was really, he was a big part of the new album becoming what it was because he would inspire me with all this music he's listening to that I wouldn't necessarily have discovered. And there's so much stuff that inspires me, and then he got better and better. All of a sudden he's gigging and he's like, he's producing for these singers and R&B artists, and I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, well, how do you know this? So and then he played me some stuff. Then he heard some of the stuff I was working on, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, what do you think about doing like this? And what about a vamp like this?" And I go, "Whoa, that's killing." So it's been an immense joy doing this. Like those, I think it's 4 tunes we did together. There's one tune he wrote completely on his own, but it's been so great because it comes 100% from him. I can take no credit whatsoever for where he's at and how good he is. It's just an inspiration musically, but also humanly, And I feel like it moves me, but I also feel incredibly blessed that my little son. It's like 5 minutes ago I was changing his diapers, and now he's showing me like a vamp and an alternate bridge on a song. I'm like, what happened? you know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really.
that's awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah. Um, I wanted to talk about your Discover Double Bass course, playing funky bass lines on the upright.
Yeah.
It's a volume 1, so we're getting a volume 2. Is that right?
Yeah, we're already talking about it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
That'll be
this
awesome.
is to get to like I mean, we did a pretty extensive course. There's like a lot of courses in there, but it's like the introduction to how I view playing funky on the upright. But
Yeah.
so we're most likely going to do a number 2 also.
Okay, awesome. There were a bunch of, I was, skimming through it, and there were a bunch of cool like examples and lessons and stuff. But we're just watching like the little intro videos. It kind of feels like you're like a lot of what you're talking about is like the attack, right? Kind of like just the vibe and the attack, bringing it to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, difference between like listen to, Louis Armstrong and listen to James Brown. James Brown is much more like a drummer. So it's more like there's like an edge on everything. Where with Louis Armstrong, it's like it's it's softer in a way. It's still very pocket, but it's softer on the edges. It's almost like if you look at a stairwell where the edges of each stair is like rounded, or it's like like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, because if you want to play funky on the upright, like the one thing why electric is so natural to be funky on with a drummer is because like the sound in the instrument is like boom, 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 boom. But to do that in the upright, it takes a little more. If you just do it on the upright, it'll be like boom, boom, boom. It gets a little more, looser, more jazzy. So if you want to be funky, to begin with, you got to be more privy on the intent of the James Brown factor on the edge of your notes. So yeah, I spend a fair amount of time coming back to that all the time because to be funky, you gotta give something to the drummer to play up at, and if there's no drummer, you gotta even do it even more. You gotta be part of the groove, um, and that if you do that, you know, I think jazz is logical, but playing more funky stuff on the upright and also on the electric, I think is the best spot on stage because you're part of the rhythm and you're part of the harmony. It's like there's no better spot if you ask me. So that's why it's like play with intent and play like you give a firm handshake.
Yeah, yeah,
So and that gets even more important when you want to be like funky and groovy on the upright.
yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what are your favorite funk like bass lines to play on the upright?
Oh man, the meters. You know,
Yeah,
yeah. And then, oh man, take your pick, any Virgin Wide bass line. And what, I mean, there's so many. Oh my God. There's so many, like, take any James Brown song. James Jameson. Uh, I mean, I can go on for days. But I mean, I always like, the first thing I think is like the meters. you know. And actually, like a lot of my favorite period with Michael Jackson, all the songs, to me, it's bass lines with somebody singing on top. Because like you think about it, also with the Jackson Five, all those songs, it's bass lines. I mean, check it out. It's really mind numbing, like how great the bass lines are. Obviously, the singing is pretty good too, but
yeah.
there's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, there's just some lines I think kind of feel and fit nice on the upright. So I
Yeah.
didn't know if you
I
had
mean, the
specific
meters
ones.
fits really great on the
Yeah,
upright. It really does.
yeah,
Also, another one that's pretty good on upright is on boom. That's
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. Oh man, it's just fun. And it's gotta be fun. If you're having fun, the fun and the love spreads, and if it spreads to the audience, everybody's having a good day. We're agents of goodwill, and the more we can spread it, the better everything becomes.
That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
awesome. What you brought up Michael Brecker, who you worked with for some time, and you kind of talked about, well, I don't know, geeking out is the right word, but getting into details about a lot of stuff. What can you remember any of those conversations specifically that you guys like really getting into it?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, one thing is like his nickname for me was tech support. um, no, but especially it was like, obviously we talk a lot about like the musical aspects of it too, but MIDI routing and like how you can make it behave in a certain way because he had his EWI and the stuff he could do with that, my God, you know. But let me see, is there any particular stuff I can remember with the tech stuff? Uh, well, I mean, it was basic. It wasn't only musical tech stuff, everything. I mean, he would, for example, before anybody did it, he would film so much on the road and make movies of it. And he would do soundtracks and he would do credits and everything. And it was like back in the iPod days. He did one of the movies he did. I actually ended up posting on my Instagram thing, but it's the attack of the iPods. And that's from a tour we did in Japan, and Randy Brecker was on that tour too. But he did the whole thing on this little camera, and I mean, watching that movie, you will appreciate to what level he was an expert and a fellow geek. You know, it's really hilarious. So I'd
Yeah,
really recommend checking that out. The Attack of the iPod. It's really fun.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I just know that he seemed. They just released like his practice book, recently, and it just seems like he's so meticulous about everything. I just wondered what kind of that stuff rubbed off on you.
Oh, I mean, we had a really strong kinship, right? I had that too. I have that too with Randy. Obviously, I knew Randy longer than I knew Michael, um, but I remember one funny episode. I don't know why that comes to mind. Like the Brecker Brothers got made again after the second coming of the Brecker Brother, with James Genius and all this stuff. Then after that was like a little slight period where there were some gigs with the Brecker Brothers where I was part of it, and we were at Mount Fuji, and they hadn't played the songs in a while, and nobody remembered how anything went, so we're all nervous. And so we're doing sound check, and here's Mike showed up with some new gear. It's just like a little microphone. Everything's like and everything worked meticulously. And then Randy had his pedal board that was like making all these buzzing sounds, and it was just like the concert was hilarious, and the way they would interact about the tech stuff is just thinking about it makes me laugh. Actually.
Cool, man. That was a lot of the questions I wanted to ask you. I know you said you got a tour coming up with Robin Ford. Is that European, or is that coming stateside at all?
For now, it's just European. We start on Tuesday. Like, what is it? Like 4 days from now. Yeah, we got 3 weeks in Europe, and yeah, that'll be fun. We talked about doing some playing and said, why don't we do this together? And it's going to be a lot of fun. And then with Ricky Peterson on organ and keyboards that I've known for ages, via Sanborn, obviously, and then Keith, my buddy Keith, Wolfmeister.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, yeah, I was thinking about bringing both my electric and an upright on that one, but I said, no, you know what? Let me just bring the electric upright, and I think it's going to be real. And I'm bringing my pedals too. So
All right. Yeah, man. Okay, so and you said you're already working on an album. We're maybe having another Discover Double Bass thing. What else do you have going? I mean, you said at the beginning of this that you're a guy that's not sitting still very long.
yeah, I mean, I wrote a ballet.
What?
I'm not dancing in it though.
Okay.
No, but that's more like I love the American songbook and that whole tradition. So I wrote this story and made this ballet with a fantastic choreographer called Gregory Dean, and it's instructed by my girlfriend Femke Slot, and it's set around the tradition of obviously Sinatra, but also the Hurricane tradition and its big band and all that stuff. And there's a ballet company in Romania that took a license to it, and I'm doing it with Live Nation. This is going to be our second season. When I'm doing this Christmas, like in November, December, I'm doing that. And then right before that, I'm doing a tour with the Nomads again, and this time with Till Brunner on trumpet, and that comes right after I do this summer tour. So I go from like there's a lot of different stuff, which for some reason my weird mind likes that. That there's a little bit, and then I'm also going to do in the beginning of the year something more classical. I do a lot of those duo concerts where I do some of those cello suites with a pianist, not cello suites. I do some of the Bach stuff with the cello concertos, but I do it with a pianist, and then I take the liberty of sometimes, I play the melodic stuff, but then I also solo in the idiom stuff. So that I do too. So, there's just so much music to enjoy and play, and it doesn't get easier when you have like what 3, 4 different basses that you want to play too. So for now, everything I think it feels natural, feels good. It doesn't feel forced, and I don't get split personality from it. I just enjoy it. I mean, and basically, I just basically love playing the bass. I love playing music, and I love sharing it. And that's kind of a motivation. I think maybe that's also why I like to do different stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure
Oh,
chatting.
likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here.